I'm Janie, and my persuasive speech is about the fact that Jackson Pollock was a hack. You have been lied to. Your teachers, your textbooks, every art class you've ever taken, every art critic you've ever listened to, they all say the same thing. They kind of insinuate that art is somehow this lofty, esoteric thing that few can truly understand, let alone create. And that you, if you do something as distasteful as commercial art or fan art or something like that, you're not really an artist. That's a bunch of BS. And what do you think? One man for that. You've heard of artists like Helen Frankenthaler, a color field artist, David Smith, an abstract sculptor. And I know you've heard of Jackson Pollock, Jack the Dripper, known for his action paintings where he just dripped paint everywhere. He became a household name in the 1940s and 50s. He tragically died at the age of 44 in a drunk driving accident. So his career was cut short, but in that short time, he rocketed up to the heavens and is now a legend of art. His work hangs in museums everywhere. It goes for hundreds of millions of dollars. Every artist wants that legacy. But not every artist has a man named Clement Greenberg behind them. You may never have heard of Clement Greenberg, but there would be no Jackson Pollock without Clement Greenberg. There would be a lot of artists who are household names, such as Helen Frankenthaler and David Smith, who would not be who they are without Clement Greenberg. Clement Greenberg was the most influential art critic to ever exist. He was the editor of 3 national magazines. And if you, as a young artist, were willing to change your style to suit his aesthetic, he'd champion you, and you could make it. His aesthetic was purity. He felt that art was becoming very kitsch. In 1909, he was born in New York City, and he never left New York. Most New Yorkers don't, they love it. New York has always been a hotbed for arts and the cutting edge of art. And he attended a lecture by a man named Hans Hofmann, who was head of the avant-garde movement in Europe. Hearing about avant-garde, learning about it, Greenberg stated that avant-garde is the only living culture we now have, because everything else was sticky, sweet sentimentality. People like Maxfield Parrish, who was a rock star in his day, were just these commercial artists, and it was lowbrow, and it didn't have anything to do with real art. Art needed to be pure. Anything that distracted from the flatness of a canvas wasn't real art. It was shadows on Plato's cave. They were fake, it didn't exist, and this was taking away from what the true essence of the canvas was. So, when he went to Peggy Guggenheim's apartment in New York City one day, he saw this huge canvas, beige, with white and black splatters everywhere. It was called Mural, and it had been commissioned by Peggy Guggenheim of the Guggenheim Museum, an heiress and great patroness of the arts, for her apartment by Jackson Pollock, or for Jackson Pollock. He is said to have been commissioned by Peggy and then spent months staring at this immense canvas, tortured by it, because he couldn't do the canvas justice. He needed to understand what he needed to do for this canvas. And then lo and behold, the day before it was due to be delivered to Peggy, inspiration struck him, and in a fever, he worked for 12 hours straight through that snowy December night to come up with one of the finest paintings in history. That was actually debunked by art critic Francis V. O'Connor. He actually painted it 3 months before in the summer. But it's a great story, isn't it? His wife, Lee Krasner, came up with that one, championed by Clement Greenberg, to show what a tortured artist he was. He was a tortured man. He was an alcoholic, and he could not shake that demon. But he was also really a brilliant artist. Having to change your style to suit a critic's demands doesn't sound like somebody who's a really great artist to me. What started out as Pollock's natural inclination as an artist to explore and experiment ended up becoming his prison because of Greenberg. Greenberg being the champion of this purity, when Pollock tried to change his style, as artists do when they're looking for new ways and outlets to be, none of his paintings sold. He had to revert back to being Jack the Dripper because he needed the money. Lee Krasner, his wife, also very carefully maintained his image. Even after his death, even though they had divorced because he was not very faithful to her, she still maintained his estate and image. And though Greenberg fell out of favor because it had been shown far too often that he had changed artist styles, even changed David Smith's sculptures after his death to suit his view of purity, and too many people were being made, or most often broken, by Greenberg because he didn't approve of their style. Also, the art world was just changing. It was going more political. In the 1970s, he really fell out of grace, whereas Eva Cockcraft, who was an art critic, pointed out that a series of very popular exhibitions hosted by Greenberg of Pollock's work were backed by the CIA. According to Cockcraft, that was a way to discredit the social realism that this new political art was trying to show. To go back to what would become a kitschy, pedantic kind of art from the 50s was no longer relevant. One commentator on the article openculture.org talking about was Pollock a genius or a hack said, "It is incredibly naive to think that talent, not promotion, is what makes one." So, is it talent or promotion? Next time you're sitting there thinking to yourself, "I'm terrible, I'll never get this," go find yourself a Clement Greenberg. Maybe you will.